What's going on, wrestling fans? I'm Jeff Upson. You are now tuned in to the PA Power Hour, and I got a special guest tonight from the morning call. He's Tom Housenick, and he's kind of like the District 11. You know, you and Brad Wilson are kind of like me of out, east, right? You know everything that goes on out there.
Oh, if only that were true, Jeff.
Well, Tom, you and I have talked a little bit this season about just the differences between last year and this year. It seems like last year District 11 really took the brunt of the COVID restrictions and really not having any competitions coming into the postseason. You know, Nazareth, Becca, you had some of their wrestlers going through the state tournament and earning medals and still only having like 10 to 12 matches in the season. Tom, what's been different this year? Obviously, we've had more competition, but what's it been like for you and just for the district as a whole as compared to last year?
Well, Jeff, it has been better. Last week was a bit of a hiccup. Three of the four events that I had planned on going to were wiped out. A couple of dual meets, and Parkland has a winter duels tournament that's got some pretty good teams in it from districts 1, 3, and 11. So that was wiped out. It seemed that, and it was a crazy situation with that one. It seemed as if Parkland could compete but couldn't host.
Mm,
And with that happening at the last minute, Northampton was there, and they couldn't jump in and host. So Northampton ended up having a match with Delaware Valley, which came all the way down from District 2 to have a Friday night match with Easton, and then just came over Saturday morning and wrestled Northampton, made the best of the weekend as much as they could, because obviously where they're located, they've got a tough situation trying to fill out their schedule, and they
right.
do a great job finding some tournaments and finding some District 11 competition. So that works out well for them. But other than last week, it's been pretty good. The Holiday Classic at Liberty, supposed to be 32 teams. It ended up being 26. The two out-of-state teams didn't come, and Northampton was the big absence
Right.
from in-state. Again, Northampton's probably been hit the hardest of all of our teams. And again, between last year and this year, Northampton really could have used some mat time. He's
Right.
got a lot of young kids, a lot of inexperienced kids, and they're really suffering because they can't get any kind of competition consistently. They've only wrestled twice since the middle of December. So they've been hit hard. Last week, Parkland, Allentown Central Catholic, and the two Bethlehem City schools, Liberty and Freedom, were shut down. They didn't
Right.
wrestle. But other than that, and the fact that Bethlehem Catholic was supposed to wrestle some of those teams, most everybody's had some kind of rhythm, as opposed to last year where we were sitting through a 3-week shutdown where nobody was wrestling. Most kids weren't even in rooms until the middle of this month. So it's been better. Hasn't been great, but it's been better. I'm not looking over my shoulder as much, although with some big matches coming up, my fingers are crossed, and I'm hoping my phone doesn't buzz.
Right. And I mean, you got Escape the Rock this weekend. You know, that's always a big draw for District 11 teams. And we're starting to get into that dual season where we're going to have these big schools going head to head, right? And, it just seemed like last year, I mean, Nazareth is on the schedule, and then, all right, that's canceled. This Becca's on the schedule, now that's canceled. And, from a standpoint where I do rankings, it's like, I don't know what's heads or tails, right? I mean, it's super hard, and I'm sure it's very similar to you because you're like, what are we talking about here other than the fact that there's a pandemic, right? I mean, how are you supposed to cover wrestlers that you don't see, right? I mean, it's got to be strange, right?
It makes it difficult because you want to see a couple of kids here, a couple of kids there from schools that you're normally not going to cover in a dual meet setting. So you really want to get a chance to see them in a tournament, and when those tournaments are gone, you're in a tough spot. So you're kind of guessing and you're looking at scores, and that doesn't translate. So this year I've been lucky enough to see a lot more schools than last year, and even the year before. I've just the way the schedules worked out, and a lot of the dual meets that everybody's talking about haven't happened yet for the most part. So I've been able to see some other schools that I haven't seen before. I've got to see Xavier Arner from Whitehall, who has been real close the last couple of years
Yeah.
to breaking out. I've got to see him live. I'm going to see him live again coming up soon. So just good to get eyes on kids. And the Escape the Rock, of my top 10 teams in my coverage area, six of the top eight are there,
Right.
including a couple of my District 1 schools. So that's like golden for me to be able
Right.
to see Quakertown and Faith Christian and Penridge go up against Bethlehem Catholic and Easton, and just see how they, and plus all the other top level talent from out of the state coming there. So it's just invaluable to be able to see faces and be able to judge based more on just scores, which thank God, there's been a lot more of that this
Right.
year.
It's funny that you say that because I know I've been more cognizant about. I think I took it for granted before, but this year I've been really starting to plan out this. I started playing the schedule, months before the season, which is rare for me. But picking which tournaments and duels to go to get the most bang for your buck. Like I normally go to Ironman, but I went to Cumberland Valley because I wanted to see Nazareth. I wanted to see Cumberland Valley and some of the District 3 teams, but also some District 4 teams like Shikellamy, who I'm not going to see, and then go to Powerade. Because like you said, the Escape the Rock is kind of a golden tournament for you. Like I was very strategic in what I was planning to go to this year because I was so afraid we were gonna, something was gonna happen, and I just wanted to have those, like you said, eyes on wrestlers. It's one thing to look at scores, but to actually get your eyes on them and see how they're wrestling and how they're fighting through, how they're acting on the mat, because that plays a lot into it, right? I mean, so it's kind of interesting how you bring that up. You mentioned how you got to see some different teams and different schools, different wrestlers that you wouldn't typically get to see before. But I think the sentiment right now is District 11 is back, especially when you look at the teams. A lot of chatter is going on across the state about how good District 11 is, especially from a team aspect. And that wasn't there last year, right? Because, I don't think half the teams even had any dual meets. Waynesburg was pretty much just given the trophy for the team tournament. Central Dolphins somehow made it through. They beat Becca, they're in the state finals, and it was just a weird circumstance, right?
Yeah.
This year, it's really the talk of the town is how good Nazareth is, how good Becca is, how good Saucon Valley is, and Notre Dame Green Pond. And you can't deny it that those schools are just, they're really, really good, right? What's been your take on all that?
Well, last year I think, as bad as it was because of COVID, it was also an embarrassment for District 11, because if you look at the teams who entered the team duels tournament, one was de facto, they went in just to go in,
Mm-hmm.
and then doesn't send out half his lineup in Double A, Notre Dame, and then they lose in the first round to Southern Columbia. Now, may have they lost with a full lineup? We don't know. But the fact is, they didn't send their whole team, made no bones about it. That's how they were going to do it. They were the only team that wanted to go in Double A from District 11. So, the other teams can't really complain. And in Triple A, Bethlehem Catholic was missing a couple of key parts, and the kids who were there, some of them were already checked out because of just the way the season had gone, and they were just done.
Right.
And they wrestled like it against Cumberland Valley. More credit to them. They came out and like it mattered to them. And I think District 11 has a little bit of chip on their shoulder after the way things went last year, and they just so happen to have four really good teams, two in Double A and two in Triple A. I think, again, Easton is much improved, but as many saw last night, they've still got a ways to go. They banged heads with Nazareth, and Nazareth, beat them 43-15, and it was every bit that impressive. Easton's very young. They had one senior starter, and one of the top three heavyweights in the state is their only senior right now in the starting lineup. So they've got some time, but Nazareth isn't exactly like loaded with all kinds of seniors, but
Right.
they're veterans. Last year they had two starters go into the postseason. It was their first career varsity match, was in a district tournament,
A district.
which is just, it's
That's
bizarre.
insane,
And of course,
right? Bizarre,
of
yeah.
course it being Nazareth, both of them medaled, and both of them went pretty far, including Sean Kenny, who made it to the state final and sudden victory. So, again, Nazareth, top to bottom, has a lot of good kids. Bethlehem Catholic is better up top, and they've got an abundance of kids down
Down low,
below.
right?
They've got some state medal caliber kids who will not be in the postseason lineup. And again, they've got a couple guys hurt. When they come back, they're going to be really tough to beat. That's going to be, again, with the crazy schedule. This is getting off target, but the EPC schedule, Bethlehem Catholic and Nazareth don't meet in the regular season. So they will meet on what they call EPC Day on Saturday, the 29th of this month, for the for the EPC title, and then they'll meet in the district final, and then who knows after that. But
Right.
that's already, again, that's on my calendar, a few months earlier, and it's no different in Double A. Saucon Valley has a pretty good lineup. They've got 4 freshmen at the bottom that are probably the key to their team postseason hopes, and we'll find out how good those freshmen are on Thursday night when they wrestle Notre Dame for the first time of what will
Right.
probably be a few. And Notre Dame's upper weights are better, just like Bethlehem Catholic. They are better. And their lower weights are pretty darn good. Some of those kids have come a long way in a couple of years, and Notre Dame and Bethlehem Catholic have managed to stay in the room more than any other teams in District 11 the last 2 years, and
Mm.
that's noticeable for particularly when you see how their young kids are now. Again, forget Nate Desmond; he is what he is, regardless if he's in a room or not. And the same thing with when we eventually see Colin Rath. But
Right.
there are other young kids who needed mat time are getting it, and that's why they're in the good positions they're in too.
So going back to Nazareth, because you just saw Nazareth last night against Easton, I look at their lineup, and I got to see them the opening weekend. They were without Charlie Bunting, but they still, I mean, I can't believe these journeymen, right, that they have there, like Aiden Rader, who I knew the name, and I looked him up, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He wrestled a couple matches every year. He's back. Nick Foster, a guy who's had a really strange career. Chase Levy, another guy who's had a kind of strange career. These are the guys that I look at. I'm like, I can't believe, one, you're still wrestling, and two, you're putting out the output that you are. Because Raider, I mean, he was knocking off guys that he had no business doing, based on his credentials. Chase Levy, same thing. I mean, he's right there with some of the top guys in the state. I look at their whole, right? Obviously, we talk about freshman phenom Tahir Parkins, right? We know how good he is. We know how good Sean Kinney is after last year. We know Sonny Sasso is a completely different wrestler than he was last year in March. But it's these other guys that I'm like, these are the difference makers, if you will. And it kind of showed last night against Easton.
No question. And I still go back to a conversation I had after the district tournament last year with Dave Kroll, and he said I had to double check who some of my guys were in my lineup for my postseason,
Wow.
individual postseason, and they're guys you're talking about. I mean, Noah Okamoto, who's now out hurt,
Yeah.
was one of those guys. Ryan Fairchild, Dominic Wheatley.
Yeah.
Again, Aiden Rader is a guy now who's putting himself in a position where you're thinking, okay, he might be able to get out of regionals.
Right.
He's just done some things. It's just last night against Easton, like he was facing a pretty good freshman who's got a lot of moxie and is a typical tough Easton kid that they've kind of brought back there, and he took him apart. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, he just took him down 8 or 9 times. I haven't seen Aiden Rader take anybody in his career have
Right.
8 or 9 takedowns, and he had one. He had 8 or 9 in a 5-minute span. He was really good last night. Now again, he's not a world beater, but this is what makes Nazareth's team so difficult, and especially in team settings, and whether you're in team tournaments or individual tournaments where they just pile up team points because everybody in the lineup gets some points. Now again, if he can find a way to get a 6-pounder to develop, again, he's undersized, he has no experience, he's just started wrestling varsity last week. So that's a lot to ask for him. But from 13 on through to 285, they really have a good group of kids. And again, these are not like stud Division I recruits, other than the handful that you've already mentioned.
Right. Right.
They just have guys in there who know how to wrestle, they know situations, and they don't panic. And Nick Foster is a perfect example. Last year was just a complete lost year.
Yep.
The year before, he got hurt, and then he got in the lineup, and then he wasn't making weight, and then he lost the wrestle off, and then he gained like 20 pounds for JV districts. I mean, it was just, he's had 2 years where between those two he's covered just about everything, and
Right.
he's finally starting to put it together where even when he's getting beat at the Beast or Cumberland Valley, he's right there.
Yeah.
He's only had one match where, and again, I think it was one of the national prep kids who beat him up pretty good, but he couldn't put him away. And all the other matches, he's right there. I mean, he's had some real close ones, and he's responded well after those losses. He hasn't just kind of like gone into a shell. So it's been great to see him kind of evolve, and that's why Dave Kroll is respected the way he is, because he finds these kids, and they just emerge into medal contenders, and you're like, wait a minute, where'd he come from? Who is he?
Right.
He just year
Right.
after year, it's amazing.
Well, I mean, and I look at it and I'm like, Chase Levy, like you could have quit 2 years ago. No one would have said anything, right? Or even Nick Foster, right? You could have quit and no one would have said, you know what, why did you do that? I mean, because honestly, like you said, the bizarre kind of years that they had and they stick around, which is, that buy-in and, you look at that level of that room. I mean, like you said, from 13 to 285, there's not a hole. I mean, especially once they get Noah Okamoto back into the lineup, there's no hole there. There's nowhere you're going to puncture through and say, you know what, this is we're going to expose them here because it doesn't matter against the best team. They're always, like you said, they're going to battle and give you your best. And that's, I think obviously it's a testament to the program and the coaching staff as a whole, right? But
No
it's just
question.
it's incredible to hear names like Aiden Rader and Nick Foster and Chase Levy as, like you said, as being the guys that are really driving the train forward. And Sonny Sasso, we know how good he is. We know how good Sean Kinney is. He's going to battle with Matt Cruz back and forth. And speaking of Sean Kinney, he looked good last night, right, against Matt Cruz, especially coming off that loss.
Cruz had his attention. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
He seemed, and the word isn't disinterested, but at the holiday classic final against Cruz, he just wasn't as into the match as we expect. And again, I saw that once last year, and that was in you think here, the super regional final against the kid from West Scranton, who
right.
he
Yes,
had
I remember
handled.
that. Yep.
He had handled him the week before, and I think he probably thought, I'm good, and he wasn't. But then he went and turned around and had that kind of state tournament. So I think that was good for him to see Cruz, and it's going to be good to see Cruz, every other week for
Right.
a few weeks coming up soon. I think that's good for both of them because they're two different wrestlers. Cruz is a real grinder, and he knows he needs to sometimes pick up the pace and take some shots. And last night's match was still at Cruz's pace. Kinney can wrestle up tempo for
Right.
for a 285 pounder, and he knows he's got to get to his offense a little more than he did last night. But he was certainly more into last night's match, and again, I think that was a good thing for him to see that kind of that failure, in front of a big crowd, and
Right.
and to get it early in the year, so that was good
Sure.
to see.
I see parallels between last year in District 7, Isaiah Vance and Billy McChesney from Hempfield area and Greensburg Salem. They wrestled, I think, 6 times last year. And, Vance lost to him in the section finals. And of course, Vance then lost to Sean Kinney, which kind of shocked a lot of people. But, having that person that just kind of you grind with every week, I mean, you're starting to see it that it's going to make these two better, right?
No question.
In the long run. So,
No question.
we talked about Nazareth. Now, Becca, as we mentioned before, they have a log jam. Well, log jam is not even the correct term. It's something worse than a log jam of talent down underneath, right? I mean, you have guys like, Frenzy, Marco Frenzy. You have the Campbell brothers. You have Charlie Pavis. You have Shane McFillan. These guys that are all very talented wrestlers. I mean, Shane McFillan was on our True Power card. He wrestled Anthony Mutarelli, who's number 3 in the nation, 5 in the nation. It's I'm sure talking to Jeff Karam, he wishes like they could combine, they could put Marco Frenzy and Shane McFillan together and get a really, really good 215 pounder or something. But like you said, they're better up top than they have been in years past, right? Where you say they're really good throughout the middle. What do you make of the Bethlehem Catholic lineup? And I'll add the caveat: we haven't seen them nearly as much as we've seen other teams, or we haven't seen their starters nearly as much as we've seen other teams. Like you said, Colin Rath, not being in the lineup. Not that Ashton Campbell is not a good guy to have as a backup because he was a state qualifier as a freshman, but we just haven't quite seen them to the extent that we have seen other teams.
No, there's no question about that. I think if you start up top, obviously their heavyweight Elijah Thompson is not going to be a state medalist. They don't need him to be. They just need him to stay off his back, not give up the automatic 6. Same thing at 215, whether it's Augie Warnke, sophomore who transferred in from Pottsville, or he's going to bump once he gets everybody back. He's going to bump people up in a team setting, and he'll cover up some of those holes because he has kids who can do that.
Right.
He can bump up Luke Thomas or and Landon Muth when he gets back, and some other guys just from like 45 on up. He can close up some of the gaps that are going to be there when they face Nazareth or when they face Waynesburg. I mean, that's what he has to do. But his biggest issue is the wrestle offs. I mean, he had
Yeah.
after he has their holiday tournament, which again is not as prestigious anymore as it once was, and not what the Bethlehem Holiday Classic is. But he had a situation where one of the weight classes he had two of his kids in the final, and the
Right.
kid who won
Right.
the wrestle off in the preseason didn't win the final, so
Right.
he had to have another wrestle off, and so we're back to having wrestle off in early January, and he's going to have another one in a couple of weeks, at least one that could again change what has already happened. We could see different guy in the postseason than we've seen most of the regular season. So again, it's a great problem to have, but you have an injury or two, and you don't even. I mean, Andrew Harmon is a key cog in
Key
the middle of
component.
that
Right.
lineup, and he hasn't wrestled at all because of injury, and you wouldn't know it. That's a great situation to be in. He knew last year that he was going to be in this position. He was praying for some kids to just kind of like sprout up and gain weight.
Right.
And it might happen next year, but it didn't really happen this year. So he's going to be just fine. The situation with Nazareth is going to be all about matchups. And again, if you can from Nazareth from 72 to 285, if you can stay away from just giving them 24 points, that's a bonus
Right.
in Bethlehem Catholic size. I mean, that's what is going to happen with most teams because they're so good up top. And again, Bethlehem Catholic is that good down bottom. Other than Parkins, who is a stud at 13 for Nazareth, they're in a situation where they've got and Charlie Bunting, who has really wrestled well since he's come back from
Yes, he has. Yeah.
his shoulder surgery. He's really impressed me. If he gets even a little more aggressive, he's going to be dangerous. But other than those two, they've got to look for a couple of wins for some guys that we've been talking about who are going to have to step up against really good kids from Bethlehem Catholic,
Right.
and that's what's going to make that a great dual meet. It's almost going to be like in three pieces. You're going to have the upper half where you expect Nazareth to dominate, and then when you get around to Desmond at 6, you're going to start thinking, okay, here comes the train from Bethlehem Catholic, and then you're going to get somewhere in the middle, maybe at 45, 52, 60, where there might be some toss-up matches that are really going to decide the dual meet each week.
Right.
So that's going to be fun to watch. I just want to see both teams fully healthy, see what they fully have, and it really will go down to the last bout. I think both times or however many times they have in a wrestle.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I just want to see everything they got. Nothing left on the table. Like you said, Andrew Harmon, Noah Okamoto, get them all out there and
Absolutely.
just and have them all wrestle. And I tend to agree with you with it's almost like the match in 3, and you have those upper weights where Nazareth is coming out to a strong start, and then you turn the corner, and Nathan Desmond is, like you said, Nathan Desmond's just a different level, right? He's on a different level. He's that good. But then to hear Parkins, right? I think he's gonna have he's gonna have to get a big win, right? And
Nope.
Charlie Bunting's beat Cale McIntyre like I think 6 times in his career, right? I mean, and Charlie's wrestling better than he was before, I think too. So I don't know how much of a mental aspect comes into that, like Nazareth kind of being the hey, we're gonna come out and punch you in the mouth type of mentality. I don't know, because Becca, like you said, they're maybe ducking and diving and weaving a little bit, but they're gonna be right in the fight, right?
No question. And then it all depends too on where that match starts. Because if it
Yeah.
starts in the middle where you think you're going to have the best matches competitively, then what does the emotion become after you see what transpires in those 3 or 4 bouts? Does it put more pressure on Nazareth's upper weights to make sure they get pins, or does it do the opposite to Bethlehem Catholic when they
Mm,
come around again, that they've all got to come up with big bonus points? I mean, there's so much so many factors that can come into those two when they go together because they're that close. There's so much, and it's again, I'm just counting the days until the first
sure.
match, and then be excited when we get that, and then move on to the next one, and so on. So that's pretty fun.
So looking at the state, I mean, I moved Nazareth up to number one once Charlie Bunting came back and we saw the form that he was in. Um, Waynesburg, they lost a few hammers, right? They lost Luke Augustine, they lost Wyatt Henson, but from a complete team standpoint, it's going to be hard for any team, let alone Becca, to beat them in the state, which you look at the track record that Nazareth has. It's just like, when is this going to stop, right? I mean, they keep on doing it, right? And when you look at Double A, I would say it's a little bit different because Saucon Valley is just. I'm not saying they came out of nowhere because they didn't, but they have such a good core freshman class and some upperclassmen that just have been constantly, much like Nazareth, grinding out years and taking their lumps. Saucon Valley, I mean, at first when I sat down and started looking at Double A state team rankings, I'm looking at Southern Columbia, I'm looking at Reynolds, I'm looking at Notre Dame, I'm looking at Saucon Valley, and I just, especially after that first opening weekend at Top Hat, I'm like, my gosh, Saucon Valley is really tough. I mean, they have all the pieces in place. I just look at them as the most complete team in Double A, especially after Reynolds has just the wells is dry, unfortunately. Yes. for Reynolds. And District 4, you have some really good teams, but my gosh, Saucon Valley's just, like you said, from top to bottom, much like a Nazareth. I would say almost like Nazareth. There's very few, chinks in the armor, if you will. What has been your observations of seeing the guys from Saucon Valley competing thus far?
Well, I did see them at Top Hat, which was one of the reasons I went there. That and the fact that Northampton went there instead of going to Beast. But there were some young. I wanted to see the 4 freshmen. I wanted to see what level they were at, and obviously Cole Hubert was the one who impressed me the most that weekend. Wasn't a great field at 106, but he took care of business, and he took care of business fast. And the other kids had some adversity, and it was great to see how they bounced back from a loss in the quarters or semis and have to battle back that same day. Here you are, you're going from being big boy in the lower levels, and now you're at the varsity level, and bang, you get beat, or you get beat up pretty good. And it's nice to see how they responded. But it's more some of those kids that have been around for 3 or 4 years, I think have gotten better. Last year was so difficult to judge. But if you take, and this will go down to one of our topics later, but Cale Markle has really improved.
Yeah.
He was one of those kids, and I talked to Chad Shirk earlier this week about him ahead of the Notre Dame match on Thursday, and he said he's really come a long way, and it's been very simple. He has minimized the number of, quote, stupid mistakes he's made. He would get in a big match or in a big tournament situation and make a mistake, and next thing you know, he's getting pinned.
Yeah.
That's been, if Saucon's had a bugaboo when it's come to either the state duels or the match against Notre Dame, whether it's districts, Colonial League, whatever, they've made big mistakes, and Notre Dame has capitalized, or other seasoned teams, whether it be Reynolds or whoever, has taken advantage of that. Chestnut Ridge, same cast of characters in Double A that are just amazing how they can put it together year after year. And I think this team this year has the capability, again, if healthy. Dante Mahaffey just came back to the lineup after a football injury, kept him out for a while, and that really solidifies things up top for them. If they stay away from those kind of silly mistakes, and we'll see about that on Thursday, that they're going to have a good chance to be the last team standing. Chris Arciolo has been just an enigma. There's just no other way to put it. He wrestled really well at Top Hat, and then not always the case since then. Didn't wrestle at the Holiday. Now he's back. Again, he's one of the most skilled wrestlers that Saucon has in the room. But he's got to be engaged, and he's got to be engaged for 6 minutes, and he's got to be able to get smacked in the mouth and come back. I mean, I've seen that kid bleed more than I haven't. That's something that probably he can't control.
Right.
But he's had a lot of injury time over his course of his career. It's amazing. The two, take his older brother, who's at Columbia now. He seemed to never get hurt until the state team tournament his senior year. But his the younger brother Chris is just it's one thing after another. I mean, he looks like he's gone through some boxing matches at times where his eye is just like completely swollen shut. He can't even see, or he just can't stop bleeding. But for him, I think it's more of a mental situation that if he's checked in and he's engaged, that's going to be a great match. If it comes off at 52, for instance, with Evan Mag, who is a really
Really,
improved
yeah,
Crusader for sure. But Liam Scrivenich at 60, he's not had some luck, not had luck against a Holden Garcia or whoever he's wrestled at Notre Dame for that matter. I mean, he's got to step up. Jake Jones, another one. He's been really really good, and he's demolished all inferior competition. But it'll be anxious to see how he handles somebody who's not going to just give him something to wrap his head around in the
right.
first period, And again, up top, they've got some really good kids. Ty Fizemayer's come a long way. Again, he's undersized. Wherever he wrestles, he's going to be the lighter guy on the mat. But he's figured out some wrestling skill that, and then teamed it with his attitude on the football field, and he's become a pretty good wrestler. Dante Mahaffey, who medaled at States last year, Ty Sensitz, who medaled at States. They're two pretty good kids to team with Fizenmayer and Jones to make those last four pretty darn good kids. So again, there are no holes when they're healthy, and right now they're healthy, and we'll find out starting Thursday how these freshmen react to some tough situations. Again, it's a dual meet. It's going to be at home, so that'll be an advantage in terms of the crowd noise and stuff like that. But they're going to get in a situation where it's not going to be so pleasant, and we're going to find out what those kids are made of. And again, I think Hubert clearly is the best of those four, but they're going to need those other three for sure down the line.
Yeah, I mean Hubert, like you said, the field wasn't deep at Top Hat, but I don't think he spent more than total of 3 minutes on the mat, in the weekend. So, he was pushed and he was tested at the Hurricane Classic, no doubt. But you look at those progressions of the other guys, and I like what you said about the enigma, right? I mean, you have a lot of good results, but then you have some head scratchers where you're like, what's happening here? We know and I feel like I've seen the names from Saucon Valley in their lineups forever. I mean, I can't believe Kale is still. I feel like his brother Matt's already graduated from Columbia, and I can't believe that Matt, that he's still wrestling, right? Because I feel like he's been around forever. And like you said, up top, it's very much like Nazareth. From 72, starting with Jones, right? Jones is probably, I wouldn't say the clear leader because you have a slew of other state medals there, but Jones has been the most active, and he's certainly the guy who's wrestling year-round, so you see him a lot more.
Right.
But from 72 on, again, you're not going to be able to get through and get a lot of points, if any, in those weight classes, even if you are Notre Dame and Chestnut Ridge is maybe a little bit different, but just looking at them, you got to think, okay, with Mahaffrey back and healthy, they're going to be really tough to beat depending on where you start. And if those freshmen start coming up through, it's going to be a very interesting duel, especially with Notre Dame. So I guess this is a good time to transition into the Notre Dame Green Pond, because I saw them up close and personal at Powerade, and let me tell you, Tom, I was impressed. They were just wrestling really well. Aiden Smith wrestled really well. Even the fact that, Adam Schweitzer, yes, he had the semifinal slide where he went from the semifinal to the sixth. He was wrestling really, really well throughout the entire weekend, which, you look at his resume and you're thinking, well, yeah, he's good. Yeah, he was a state medalist in a weird year, but like he had no business being in the same league as Vinny Kilkiri, right?
Right.
And he showed up. Those Notre Dame guys, they showed up. So my question is, from a dual perspective, can they be a complete team where, you have a competition between them and Saucon, where you have some chess pieces where you can move some people around, and some of their guys got really big. LaPena got big. Evan Mack. I mean, he was a undersized like 6-pounder a couple years ago, and now he's
Right.
up. Now he's up in weight, and he's still wrestling pretty darn tough. So Notre Dame to me is a completely different animal when you look at the team dynamics. Has that been your kind of perspective thus far as well?
Yeah, again, I think they're an intriguing matchup for Notre Dame and Saucon. I think it's really unique. I've gone up and down the lineups a couple times here today ahead of Thursday, and again, I've come up a couple scenarios where I think Notre Dame wins. Again, the match at 6 is crucial.
Crucial. All right.
Smith, I kind of dismiss um, the way things turned out when they met at the Beast in the Constellations. Smith was confused about when he was wrestling and had to basically race to the mat just in time before it became a forfeit, and then he got
Oh,
pinned
geez.
the first 40 seconds by Hubert. But so I think that's going to be a dogfight. It's important. I think Notre Dame gets points there because then the next three with the Saucon freshmen, and you take a kid like Schweitzer, who I think is one of the most improved kids. If you told me 2 years ago that he'd be a medalist in any year, I would say, are we talking about the same kid? Now I'm looking at it like he has the potential to get bonus points that are going to be huge for Notre Dame against Saucon or against anybody else. He has that potential now. But again, I know we talk a lot about transfers, et cetera, with the private schools, but I look at Schweitzer and I look at Evan Mag, and those are two Catholic school kids who have just evolved into really good wrestlers. I mean, Evan Mag has filled out tremendously. I mean, again, he was all arms and legs and skin and bones for most of his career, and now he's a good looking 52 pounder. Those two kids are key because again, Mag with Arciolo and Schweitzer against the freshman. There's a chance there that those are big swings in the match because I don't think Joey LaPena is going to go on his back at 89. I don't
Right.
Don't think no matter who Saucon puts up against him, he's too good of a wrestler. So I mean, he could even win. I'm not dismissing the fact that LaPena doesn't win at 89.
Sure.
So that's something that they didn't have in the past, and they still had good success against Saucon. Where it comes down to is some of the guys you don't talk about a lot. I mean, Holden Garcia's had a good track record against Saucon. He's going to be hard to beat. But you're looking at Keegan Ramsey, the freshman at 45, against Markle, the seasoned senior now, who seems to have his act together. You have Bryson Vaughn at 38, who has wrestled well against Saucon Valley, potentially facing Travis Riefenstahl, who has not wrestled well against Notre Dame. Neither has Connor Nicholas at 32, and he's got to face Brandon Klutzis potentially.
Right.
So you start looking and saying, okay, well, Notre Dame can get some bonus points from 3 or 4 or 5 of these matches. All of a sudden, that negates the strength of Saucon up top, and then it comes down again to a couple of toss-ups and who gets them. There's no clear-cut favorite at 13 between Fetterman and Grog. I mean, those are two unknown freshmen.
Yep.
What's going to happen there? They've been thrown into some tough situations and had some mixed results. So there's a lot of ways this thing can go, and I've gotten a different score every time I go through it, and I'll probably come up with a couple more before Thursday. But those two are going to, again, then you have the whole theatric stuff with other potential factors thrown in there, and you just never know what you're going to get with those two. So when they meet the next 3 weeks, essentially the next 3 weeks, they face each other Thursday, which is the 13th, and they wrestle on the 31st in the Colonial League Championship, and then the next week in the district final. Those are going to be 3 hotly contested matches.
For sure.
So I'm looking forward to it again. I'm counting the hours till Thursday so that no phone calls come in that one. But those two have managed to stay pretty good. Saucon had a little bit of illness, but it wasn't COVID related. But we're in the winter season; kids are going to get sick.
Right.
They had a couple kids, 2-3 kids out at the holiday, which I was looking forward to seeing how Saucon stacked up against Nazareth when it came time for team title. That would have been a good matchup, but they were missing 3, and again, Quakertown, one of my other teams, was missing 3 of their best kids. So would have been an interesting comparison to see how Nazareth stacked up against 2 other pretty good teams. So, but I'll take what I can get, and as long as the phone doesn't ring these next few weeks, I'm good.
and like you said, they very much will probably see each other 3, maybe 4 times, just in the next month or so. So we're going to be able to see, all right, adjustments and where they're made, and it's. I think you kind of said theatrics. I mean, there's no love lost there, right? Between potentially the 2 programs, right? And this is even without Ryan Crookham in the lineup. right?
Correct.
And that would have added in a whole nother saga and I would say distraction to the dual meet. But imagine how good Saucon would be even with him in the lineup, right? It's interesting to see that, or you could say, or him being in the lineup in Notre Dame too. I mean,
Right.
I'm really bummed about that we're not going to see Ryan wrestle, potentially for the rest of his high school career, which is, obviously an unfortunate thing for wrestling fans as a whole because, he's been one of the best in the state over the years.
No question. I mean, I looked at, when he walked off with that second state title a couple of years ago, and I thought, okay, he's got 100 wins. He's a sophomore, and I know the schedules are done differently, and he probably won't get enough matches to get to 200. But man, it would have been fun to watch that and watch him go for 4 state titles, and then bang,
Right.
it's gone
Yep.
for a variety of reasons. And now here we are, just hoping to get one more glimpse at him,
Right.
just to remember how good he was for 2 years as a freshman and sophomore at Notre Dame. He was, tremendous talent. He's a really good kid. Pretty humble to talk to.
For
So,
sure.
his better days are certainly ahead of him though too. So,
Yeah, I certainly hope so, and agree with you as very a humble kid. You had talked about Schweitzer and how if I would have said he was a medalist in any tournament, you would have got my head checked. There's been a lot of surprises thus far for me looking at some of the results and seeing some of these guys in person. Right out of the gate, though, I'm going to start with Oliver Fairchild. I mean, the story here is incredible, right? He beats his former teammate, and he beats him twice, right? And Braxton is a guy who's a state medalist twice before. I mean, I don't know what was going on in the room, but I would assume Braxton was probably beating him in the room. And I know what it's like to get beaten by a teammate consistently, and it's very hard on the soul, right? And then to turn it around when you're wearing different singlets, I don't know what he's been doing, but I want to know what it is because it's incredible his turnaround, and you got to see it again last night. What's been the difference for Oliver Fairchild in 2021, 2022?
until I saw him at the holiday, I thought of him as a track cross country kid who happened to wrestle,
Okay.
and now he's a pretty good wrestler. He's gotten stronger, he's gotten tougher, and his mat awareness his light years better than what it was the first time I saw him. I mean, he just both matches went down to the wire with Apello, and both times you would think that it was the state medalist who was finding this way to win. And I'm not saying Apello did anything wrong. I mean, there were some great scrambles late in the third period last night, and I kept thinking, okay, Apello's getting it. He's getting it. He's getting it. And Fairchild not only didn't let him get it, but then when they got to overtime, he was the one who countered and finished. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, how did he win that? Even though he was, and one thing I'll say about Fairchild is he is not just a defensive wrestler. He's not a reactive wrestler. Has been aggressive, no matter the talent level he's looking at. And he was like that last night. He took most, if not all, the legitimate shot attempts for the almost 7 minutes. He was mostly the aggressor. And again, I think a lot of that has to go to an attitude adjustment on his part. The climate in the room. Jody Karam he may not have the talent level that Easton had in the 90s and the 2000s, but he's working toward that. And one thing that's starting to come back is that chip that I may not be better than you, but I'm going to be tougher than you, and by the end of the third period, I'm going to beat you.
Mm.
And against Nazareth, that wasn't so obvious most times, but in that one particular match, it was. And there have been some other matches where they face teams that are, talent-wise around similar level to Easton, but Easton wins all the close matches.
Right.
They're finding ways. They wrestled Delaware Valley. They won every close match except one. And next thing you know, it's like this is a runaway. So Oliver Fairchild, one of the top, if not the top, most improved kids in District 11 for sure.
I mean, Tom, he was 4-4 last year. I mean, he was 500, right? And he was 4-4, and the year before that, he was 14-12. And when I look at that from a purely number standpoint, I'm thinking, you either did something very significant over the summer, like you went to a camp or you went to a mental, training, it's something, because you just don't, it doesn't just switch. But I mean, you're right. Maybe that's a testament to Jody Karam and kind of the attitude in the room that he's in right now. But and there actually has been some other kids from Easton where I'm looking like, how is this? I mean, at the Hurricane Classic, they were getting wins out of guys. I'm just like, I can't believe it, right? And like you said, the Del Val match, they ran away with it. And Delaware Valley's a really good team. They're a very solid, well-coached team, and Easton just kind of smacked them around. So clearly, I think that grittiness, that I won't say like the Iowa mentality, but that kind of like, you may be better than me, but I'm tougher than you, like you said, and I'm just gonna beat you physically. You're starting to see that back, and that's kind of incredible to see in just a quick period.
No question. Again, like I said, Easton is very young. Fairchild still has another year. Other than Cruz, they've got some good young talent that are going to be there a little while, and they've got some kids coming up. So the well's not dry. Whenever Easton's involved, it's great to see. You get Easton and Northampton back in the mix together at the same time with Nazareth and Becca. It's going to make for some interesting duels for sure, and it's a long time coming.
For sure. Another guy who I was impressed with is Adrian Gasick from Parkland. I didn't know a ton about him. I do know, what he did last year. He was 9-2 last year. I know he had some good matches, but he really wasn't outside of a few. He didn't really wrestle any high level guys. I think Wayne McKintry was probably his toughest match last year. This year, he's 11-1, and he has wins over Jack Leto from Lower Merion, who's a state qualifier. He majored Quinn Scott from Emmaus, who's not bad, beat Christian Reed, beat Dalton Clymer, and he was close with Collegiesi from Council Rock South, who is, he's the number one guy in the state, and he lost to him 7-2. Gasick, for me, he was not a well-known, he's certainly not a well-known guy, but he's starting to make it that, he's starting to show that he should be, because he's not just beating guys, he's beating really tough guys, and he's keeping it close with a guy like Matt Collegiesi. Have you seen him, and what are your thoughts on him, and what can you tell us about his development?
Well, I did see him once or twice last year, and again, when you look at the way Parkland's team was constructed last year, this is a complete rebuild, and he stood out because he clearly had some wrestling savvy and some wrestling skill. But I think what was lacking for him from last year compared to this year was confidence. He didn't believe he could beat a kid of equal talent, or let alone someone with a little more talent. And I think that's kind of changed this year. What I saw at the holiday was a kid who went out there thinking, I can win. And against Collegiesi, that was a little bit of a different animal, because Collegiesi physically is a lot stronger than most kids he's going to wrestle. And that's why Gasick wasn't able to finish. He didn't finish anything. He had good shot attempts, but again, that kind of talent and that kind of strength is not going to give up a lot of points. And that was a great experience. That whole tournament was great for Gasick because they don't have a lot in their schedule, and for him to get all of that in 2 days, that was really beneficial to him. And for him to come out of there feeling good about himself. I mean, he makes the finals, and is in it until the end with a state championship caliber kid. So I think he's one of those kids, and he's at 72 last year. He dropped to 60. He looks pretty good there. That's going to make for some interesting matchups with the power schools. He's not going to go quietly, whether he's facing a Fairchild from Nazareth or whoever happens to come down, if it's Okamoto or whatever. But and some other kids, he's going to be right there, and I think he's going to be right there into Hershey. So again, I'm not surprised at his progress. I'm just surprised it happened so fast. Like by the time we're leaving the holiday, I'm thinking, he's not just in the bottom half of my rankings. He's considered somewhere up
near
toward
the top.
the top.
Right.
He's got that kind of skill, and now he's got some confidence under his wing, which is a big thing for him. You could see that there was that tentativeness last year, and the couple of tough situations he got in the postseason, and again, his reaction so far this year has been much different.
So who are some of the guys that you have noticed or that you thought have looked good? I mean, and before you jump in, I will say Emmaus has some guys that I was impressed with. Albanese Marco, he had a good has had a good season thus far. He's beaten guys like Christian Fritz, a guy from Cedar Cliff who's really tough, Aiden Bachman. He beat him. Tyler Cunningham, Mikey Holler from Pocono Mountain East, he beat him. But also Jared Growler's back, right?
Yes.
He's a guy who I believe, and I think you told me this last year. He's a football guy, right? And he took last year. He did not wrestle last year, but now he's back in the lineup. I think he's all the way up at 215 now. I'm not sure how much of a wrestling shape he's in or not, but he's had a pretty good year. He's 13-3 thus far. What can you say about Emmaus, and then what are some of your guys that you thought have really jumped levels?
Well, those are two guys for sure that one has jumped back into the conversation, and the other one has just jumped up, leaps and bounds. Albanese has looked really good. I mean, he looked really good at the holiday. Was put in some tough situations by more seasoned wrestlers.
Yeah.
But I think what happened first is he got that confidence beating a kid from Northampton who was and Fritz, who's supposed to, to make it to states this year and be a contender, and he fell behind early in that match. I think he fell behind 4 or 5 points first period, and he didn't quit. Not only did he quit, but he came back and won the match. He dominated the last 4 minutes, and I think that was a huge confidence boost for him going into the holiday. And then with each match in the holiday, he's beaten good kids, and they're different styles. He handled the physical kids. He faced the Phillipsburg kid, who again, those kids only go one direction, and and no matter what they're freshman, senior, whatever, they come at you and they keep coming after you. And he handled that really well. Again, confidence was such a huge thing for him because he would, and early in his career, he really pressed when it came against a big time kid from one of the big time schools, and it didn't work out well for him. And I think he's finally gotten the confidence to feel like he can contend with them. And then when he started beating them, he's really gained confidence. And I think it's very important for Emmaus to have their full schedule for guys like him, for guys like Jared Groller, who missed last year, whatever it was, he missed it. And like I said, he's just starting to come into wrestling shape. And I think if he can get down to 89, he can really be tough because he's a real strong kid and he's got a motor and he likes to go after you. And I think that works well. It makes for fun matches at those upper weights. But those two kids really need to get 30 matches in before they get to the postseason. And every time they can run up against somebody in the Nazareth, Bethlehem Catholic, Northampton, Easton singlet, that's going to be really beneficial to them because it just kind of reinforces the fact that they not only belong, but they're one of the guys that should be looked at as a contender for a gold medal that weekend. So those two different styles, different attitudes, but both now have the confidence, and I think they've got a real chance come the postseason. Again, I think you and I talked earlier about Xavier Arner from Whitehall.
Yeah,
he's a kid now. He lost. Whitehall wrestled Nazareth earlier in the week or late last week, and it wasn't much of a match, but there were two things there that I wanted to see. I wanted to see how Arner and Tyler Cunningham, did against Nazareth kids. And again, if you can't beat those kids, you're not gonna medal. You may not get out of districts. And Cunningham's had a career of heartbreak.
Yeah.
He fell short last year to a first-year starter from Northampton. Lost to him twice at districts, including in sudden victory in the third-place match, and he was home for regionals. Again, he's lucky he got another shot, and he beat Aiden Rader. We talked about him earlier. That was a really good match, and that's a telltale match. That's one that come February, you're thinking Nazareth has the edge because they're Nazareth. Well, Cunningham now at least has something in his own psyche that he can turn to and say, hey, look, I beat this kid. I beat him at Nazareth. I took him down 3 times. He didn't take me down, and I can beat him. I should beat him. So for somebody like Cunningham, that was important. Now, Arner, he lost again to Dominic Wheatley, and again, it was 1 point, and it was a match that you think Arner's leading in the third period. You think he's going to win. He's got control, and the next thing you know, Nazareth kid finds a way to win. But Arner's a different kid mentally. He's one of those kids where that's over and done with. I forgot about that the second I walked off the mat. I still believe I'm the better guy, and I'll prove it next time. And he's got that going for him, which I think is really important. I mean, he lost heartbreakers last year at Super Regionals to Condomini by a point. 1-0, I believe, was the blood round match. And again, he had every business to win that match, but just didn't. And I think he's got a lot to draw on and has that different makeup that he can finally get over the top and get to a state medal stand rather than just a district medal stand, and look at back at what could have or should have been at regionals, or in the case last year, super regional. So those two kids come at it from different perspectives. And again, I like Arner's chances, wherever he ends up, and wherever the younger condominium, Dagan condominium ends up. They could be seeing a lot of each other in the postseason. So those are two kids that you don't normally hear of from a school that I don't get a chance to see much. Which
Right.
it was nice to put something other than just a score or a record. In Double A, we've mentioned Markle, who I think is the most improved Saucon Valley kid I've seen in a while, because he came from a situation where he was always seemed to not wrestle well when it really counted. And again, you hate to have that kind of reputation as a kid, and he's not a quitter. He didn't quit. He just made mistakes, and I think he's really cleaned that up. I'll be anxious to see again how he performs against Notre Dame on Thursday. We touched on Dalton Clymer. He got hurt tonight. He injury defaulted out of their match with Saucon Valley. Liam Scrivenich, they wrestled again. Scrivenich beat him in the Holiday Classic, so that was
an overtime, I think, right?
That was a definite eye opener for me, because Scrivenich had a great off season. He's really bulked up. He was one of those kids just thrown in the lineup when they needed him, or there was an opportunity in a dual meet, and he would wrestle up two weight classes, and you couldn't really get a gauge on how good this kid could be, but he's really committed himself to the sport. And I think he's at a tough weight class at 60, but there's no place to go. He can't go up. Jones can't go down. Arciolo. So he is what he is at 60, and I think he's got a chance to make it to states if he wrestles really well. But that was a telltale sign for me that he could beat a healthy Clymer, even though we're talking late December as opposed to February. But that was definitely a confidence boost for him. And again, the last thing anybody who has to wrestle Saucon Valley wants to see is another kid gaining some confidence and figuring out how to win some close matches. But he's one of those kids that has impressed me. So again, it seems like it's still a lot of the haves who have these kids rising up. But as we've seen with Whitehall and Emmaus, there's a couple of kids there from each school. And again, Quinn Scott's decent wrestler. His younger brother has shown.
Yeah.
Jesse has shown some life down at, I think, 32 or 26. He's not afraid to get after it. And again, some of that is just like freshmen not knowing any better. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to beat anybody. So interesting to see how he kind of evolves this year. But he hasn't looked bad. So Emmaus has again a nice team. Parkland, Emmaus, they're coming up. Again, you have Bethlehem Catholic, you have Nazareth, you have Northampton and Easton. Parkland and Emmaus and Freedom are trying to crack up, and again, that's only going to make the district better. But you just don't know. Now, Freedom's another team. They haven't wrestled
a lot. Yeah.
It's been a bad situation, just like it was last year. But they've got a kid or two. CJ Horvath, he's had some heartbreak in his young life. These 2 years, freshman sophomore year, been this close to advancing and getting to states, and just hasn't happened for him. He's been at the wrong weight class at the wrong time, and that may be the case this year. If he stays at 20, you're looking at Bunting and McIntyre and Austin No. I mentioned him from Northampton's a tough kid who doesn't back down from anybody. He just got down to 20 this week. So again, it starts to get crowded, and then you're thinking, okay, who's the odd kid out? And
right.
There's a lot going on there, and I'm not sure. But Horvath is definitely a skilled kid. He's finally filled out a little bit. I think 20 is a good weight for him. Be interesting to see what he can do. He's one kid I'm hoping can break through. He's really battled to the end, but just the first 2 years it's been a tough grind through some tough competition. He hasn't lost to kids he shouldn't lose to. He's facing quality kids, and you throw a Jack Caruso kid in there at regionals from Delaware Valley, who is now dropped to. He's coming down to 15. That just creates a whole other monster there at 113, 115 with Carson Wagner from Northampton and him. So it's getting interesting. But again, those are some of the kids that we'll see if they can find ways in February. But some of them have definitely taken steps here in the first 6 weeks or so of the season.
You've kind of jogged my memory with Arner and Cunningham. They really did. They've had some setbacks. I can remember thinking, having them high in the rankings and then just kind of like fizzling out, right? Heartbreaks and districts and regionals, and I now that you've mentioned it, I really thought, man, like Arner, he was right there. I mean, technically he was a super regional qualifier, right? So he had a quote state qualifier, but man, he's had some matches where you're right. Thought he would finish a little bit better than what he had, and I like hearing things about Emmaus and Whitehall, and I even think a guy like McClellan Warren from Whitehall, he's had a decent year. He's only lost to Sonny Sasso and Bryce Molinaro from Hazel, so like 2 state medalists he's lost to, but he's in there battling. He's right there with a kind of a wide open 215 weight class too.
Yeah, and he's another one. He needs as many matches as possible, and it's great that he got to wrestle those two. I mean, he wasn't on the mat long with Sasso, but not many people are, and he needs to go 6 minutes with a lot of good kids before he gets to districts and has to try and figure out how to weave his way through a tournament. He definitely has some talent. He definitely can make it to week 2 or week 3. There's no doubt he was one that had kind of slipped my mind, but I did see him at the Holiday and against Nazareth, and he has a chance. He has a chance, which again, that's 3 kids from Whitehall, which when was the last time you could say that they have 3 kids that have a chance to make it to states, who have legitimate chances. I mean, they just have to wrestle like you expect out of a Nazareth or Northampton kid. When it comes time to the postseason, you expect the best out of yourself. So it'll be interesting to see.
So you're the expert, right? What are you looking forward to out in District 11? Obviously, we have Escape the Rock this coming weekend. We know we have Saucon Valley and Notre Dame Green Pond, and that is what's the date on that one again?
It's Thursday, Saucon Valley, Notre Dame.
Thursday, yep. Right? Yeah. Okay. So, what else is in the pipeline as of right now that you have circled and you're saying this is a can't miss type of event or match?
Well, next week is actually another really good week. Back, again, fingers crossed, but Northampton goes to Nazareth, and from a dual meet perspective, Nazareth's going to win. They're going to win handily. But there's 3 or 4 kids from Northampton who are really good, and they're going to find out how good they are. I mentioned Dagan Condamini. He's looked really good at the top hat. He was dominant. Carson Wagner, been very good. He got that great win over Nasdio from Williamsport at the top hat. That was a huge confidence builder for a kid who's a 2-time state medalist. You would think, how could he not have confidence? But he needed that, and he's been more aggressive so far this year. Again, spotty mat time because of their situation, but he's a tough kid. And Austin Noe, another one. If they get Alex Hanley back, he's a kid who won 30 matches, I believe, as a freshman, and then just disappeared for 2 years. And now here we are into a 3rd year. This is his last chance. Again, he's one of those kids who is super skilled, but he's finding ways to kind of mess things up. And if they can get him back, again, him against Jake Dune in a dual meet, that will be fun to watch, because Hanley likes to move around for 6 minutes, and Jake Dune is not going to be quiet.
Right.
So that would be entertaining. That would be something I'm looking forward to. That's next Wednesday, a week from Wednesday the 19th. On the 20th, Easton goes to Bethlehem Catholic. Well, the brothers Karam, forget about that. This is Easton looking to see if they are taking another step forward against a lineup that is clearly loaded like Nazareth's. Where do they find wins? Which kids step up? Which one of their younger kids finds a way to beat a kid maybe he's not ready to beat? Good situation there for Easton to get tested again. And then that's Saturday, the 22nd, Bethlehem Catholic, Notre Dame.
Yep.
Great dual meet. Bethlehem Catholic, they faced for the first time 2 years ago on a Saturday night, and they're doing it again this year. I think it's great. Packed house. Last time they met, it was that'll be real entertaining. Easton Phillipsburg is always a great one on the 25th. It's in the pit. Phillipsburg's got a really good team.
Yes,
I don't think Easton can beat them, but it is Easton Peaburg. We'll find out how much Jody Karam's bunch has evolved here. They had a great off season together. They did a lot of stuff together. They went to a lot of tournaments together. It's clearly paying off. All right, but now we're talking Nazareth. They wrestled. They're coming up on Bethlehem Catholic. Then they got Phillipsburg. before they get into the team duels. They're going to find out,
Oh yeah, real
what
quick.
they're made of. And again, they're only going to get better from those kind of matches. You don't want to see them go down hard. But Karen was pleased with their effort and their stick-to-itiveness against Nazareth, even though they lost that one pretty good. But those are some big ones looking forward to. And again, by the time we get to the 31st, that's Notre Dame and Saucon round 2.
Right.
And then finally on the 29th for the EPC day, that'll be Nazareth and Bethlehem Catholic, which will be fun to watch.
Yes, it will. So what you're saying is get ready, buckle up, because it's about to get real bumpy on your trip, right? And this
Nope.
is really where we start seeing all that hard work pay off, and it's like you said, the chess matches and the multiple weeks of wrestling each other. It's not like football where you wrestle one time in the playoffs and you could see somebody for 3 weeks in a row, right? I mean, we've seen it multiple times where Becca and Nazareth have wrestled, all the way through the state finals. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how it evolves and develops. And I know this is a District 11 focused, but you also cover Quakertown. I got to see Quakertown at the Midwinter Mayhem, and let me tell you, Tom, I was impressed. Mason Ziegler is really, really tough. We did the broadcast live, and he really impressed me. Their freshman Colin Gash, he impressed me. I mean, they're on the up too. So again, I know we're talking District 11, but they're your coverage area. They're going to be a fun team to watch come the individual and team postseason as well.
There's no question. Ziegler had a semifinal in the holiday against Bunting, and Bunting
Yeah.
did everything to funk his way out of one Ziegler shot after another. Ziegler is right there with everybody from District 11. That kid is really good. Freddie Redder at heavyweight.
Yep.
He and Cruz had a blood round match at Super Regionals that went to overtime. Great match. He's right there. If he's healthy after his football injury, he's going to be right there. And the Colin Gee at 38, it's hard to believe he's a freshman.
It really is.
He's especially at 38. He's really, really good. He was one along with Redder who didn't wrestle at the holiday. I was really bummed. There's no doubt he would have been somewhere on that podium. But those 3 kids in particular, that's a really good nucleus. And again, they might get out of District 1 for team states. They really have a chance. They've already beaten Council Rock South. I mean, again, it was the opening duel, but it's still they beat them. Which, if it would have gone the other way, it would have just been, well, it's the same old. We can't get past Council Rock South or Springford. So they've got a good team. This is probably his best shot at getting not only 2 states, but maybe winning a match or 2. He's got a pretty balanced lineup, so that'll be fun to watch. And Faith Christian in AA.
Oh my gosh,
they've got some freshman hammers, man. They are really, really good. And he's got a couple holes, like he's going to give 6 up in a couple of spots, but where he's got kids out there, they're really good. The Max Stein kid, to me, I know Gage Botero gets a lot of the headlines, and he's phenomenal. But this Max Stein, I've watched him lose close matches to like studs. Like Tyler Kasak took apart just about everybody at the Beast of the East. He didn't take apart Max Stein.
Yeah,
I was 6-0, but Kasak worked for those 6 points, and that's a freshman in his biggest tournament, his first big tournament as a varsity kid. They've got a good team. The Music kid at heavyweight, he's not going anywhere. He's pretty good. He's bulked up, and he's a better wrestler, a lot better wrestler than he was last year. So those 2 are both going to make some noise, I think, in the team concept, and they've got some state medal contenders for sure.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like you said, Faith Christian is just, I got to see them at Powerade, and I knew Gage Botero. We knew he was going to be tough. We knew he was going to be all that and some more. Just seeing what he did in Fargo and the off-season stuff. Max Steen, like you said, he was a really good youth wrestler, but again, how does that translate into high school? And I mean, he took Colin Stone King, a state medalist, Division I recruit, to overtime, and that was a very, very tight match. He just beat some guys that you're thinking like, wow, how's he doing this, right? So yeah, he's gonna be a lot of fun. They're gonna be a lot of fun to watch for the next couple of years because they have some other big names coming up through. And man, it seems like they got all the right pieces in place. So that's a team that's not going to go away anytime soon with the guys that are involved in that program. It's
exactly.
They're building for the long term, right? So
No
like you said, there may be holes now, but that's a team that you're not going to want to face in a couple years, right?
No, I mean, again, the holes we're talking are maybe two. So
Yeah.
they've got it to the point now where they've got 11 kids who are pretty darn good. They're not going to give anything away. So they're good now. You're right. They're only going to get better. Those freshmen are really good. And you take a Musica and Eric Alderfer in there, two good seniors.
Yep.
They're going to make some noise.
Yes, they are. Well, Tom, I really appreciate it. It's always great to talk with you, but it's even better to talk District 11 wrestling with you. Mitch Rupert sends his regards. He's at the Southern Columbia Benton match. I was telling him earlier, I said, I'm doing rankings, and later I'm talking to Tom, and he says, boy, I don't know what's worse, doing the rankings or having to talk to Tom. And I'm thinking, that's not right. Don't, you're just because you're out of the league, so to say, you're not in the thick of it like you used to be. You don't need to rag on Tom like that. You've never done anything to anybody. Right?
He had to tolerate me for a day at the Top Hat, so he's probably still reeling from that event. So
he probably is. Well, we appreciate everything you do. We look forward to hearing your your analysis on District 11 and the teams that you cover. So we hope you have a wonderful Escape the Rock. I'm sad I'm not going to see you at Escape the Rock because I feel like that's when we always get to catch up and hang out. So we'll have to make I'll see you down the road. Don't you worry. So
we'll find time. Absolutely. I appreciate having me on.
Absolutely, Tom. Well, we appreciate it. And as always, you can check out papowerwrestling.com on Rockfin. We got podcasts. We got updated rankings that we just are publishing tonight. We got dual team rankings coming out, and we got our live streams coming. We're doing the Allegheny County tournament this weekend, so we're really looking forward to that. For Tom Housenick, I am Jeff Upson. Thanks for listening in to the Power Hour on PA Power Wrestling.